right, we've been talking about this pretty much nonstop, the issue of education. It's become I think, the top issue in politics because parents have had an opportunity to see what is happening in the classrooms of America through the pandemic when learning went online and parents did what they should have been doing all along. They got involved in their children's education. They began to see the indoctrination that was taking place. Well, over the weekend, in the gubernatorial race in Virginia, that is neck and neck, education has become the top issue. And on Saturday, former President Barack Obama was there campaigning for the Democratic candidate, Terry McAuliffe. And in his comments, he said that, look, don't listen to this, I'm paraphrasing, but that this education issue is a manufactured issue. Of course, we've seen what's been happening in Leesburg and Loudoun County, where the crazy transgender policies have led to girls being assaulted in the bathrooms. We have teachers that are protesting the indoctrination with the critical race theory and the forced use of pronouns. Is this a manufactured issue? Well, joining me now to talk more about this is Dr. Ben Carson, founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. He, too, was in Virginia recently talking about the education issue. Dr. Carson, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. It's always wonderful to be with you. Well, particularly talking about this.
Well, it's a big issue for you because you've got coming out very soon the first book for the Little Patriots program, and this is an educational program to help children know about the Judeo-Christian values, the founding of America, and why America is an exceptional nation. So let's just talk about that for a moment, then let's talk about how this has real-world application with what we're watching right now in public education.
Well, why Little Patriots is so important is because it was Vladimir Lenin who said, "Give me your children to teach for 4 years, and the seeds that I've sown will never be uprooted." So getting into our educational system and being able to indoctrinate our kids is an essential part of changing our society. And we want to combat that. So we have the book that you just mentioned, that beautiful illustrations just to help children know that this is a good place that we live in, not a bad place, with a wonderful history, and that if we work together, we can accomplish great things. But also there's an online learning program for K through 5. And, unlike the critical race theory people, we want people to go to our website, littlepatriotslearning.com, and go and look at what we're teaching those children. They'll be very proud and understand not only the workings of our government, but why it was put together the way it is, and how we as citizens can be partakers, not only the fruits, but can be contributors as well.
So Why America Matters, it's a children's book about the Judeo-Christian values of America and our founding as a nation. And this kind of, it talks about the 4 pillars, the importance of these 4 pillars of the American Cornerstone Institute, which is faith, liberty, community, and life. So how can folks find out more about this book? How can they get it? It's coming out, I think, in November, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. How can they get a copy?
AmericanCornerstone.org. Go there and order your copies today. And you can also get copies of it through littlepatriotslearning.com. You can go either direction. And I think it's going to make a big difference. We've already shown it to a lot of children. They absolutely love it. Parents love it. Grandparents love it. And it's going to be the first in a series of books. We have one coming out soon about different occupations and why each of those occupations is important.
So I know you have you're a little bias. I'm going to ask you this question, and I know you're a little biased. The former president, Barack Obama, was in Virginia over the weekend saying that this education issue, parents getting upset about education, this is a manufactured issue. I think you have a different perspective. I think education is an important issue, and it is a vital issue to the future of our country.
It is critical to our country. I always say it really doesn't matter where a person comes from. If they get a good education, they write their own ticket. But it also has a lot to do with particularly a young person's perception of themselves as they're developing that self-perception. A lot of it has to do with the way that they are educated. And to say that this is just a cooked up issue, obviously is catering to people who don't think for themselves, which I think that number is decreasing quite significantly, very rapidly. So they better come up with something else.
Education is so critical. As you talked about your self-identity and your future and what you think you can accomplish. I mean, under critical race theory, which is something you've been very critical of, because it says, if you're white, you are an oppressor. If you're black or another minority, you're the oppressed, and therefore your future is limited. I mean, it really, in many ways, prescribes a dire future for America.
Exactly. I mean, how does that in any way improve the situation? By telling one group of people that they're oppressors and another group of people that they're oppressed. How is that supposed to help? That's ridiculous. And then you have the 1619 Project that tries to orient everything around slavery. And that's why white people are bad, because their ancestors owned slaves. Of course, it doesn't tell you that the vast majority of white people in the South did not own slaves because they couldn't afford to have slaves. Only rich people had slaves. And it doesn't tell you where the slaves came from. The slaves came because in Africa, there would be tribal wars, and they would kill or capture enemies and make them into slaves. And then along came the Portuguese and said, hey, we'll buy those from you. And so all of a sudden they saw a nice source of income. So, I mean, there's plenty of guilt to go around. And also recognize that slavery has been a part of human civilization since there's been written history. And there are more slaves in the world today than there have ever been. There are more in the United States than there were in 1863 when the Emancipation Proclamation was put forth. And we need to be concerned about the sex trafficking and the slavery that exists today. We don't have to go back 100, 200, 300 years. We need to deal with what's going on here today.
I mean, obviously, history is important. I mean, we want to know our history. We need to know our history. We need to know the mistakes we made. We need to know what we did right, what we did wrong. But that's not the angle that we see this critical race theory and others coming at our history. It's as if they want to lock us into the past so that our future is determined by this negative view of our past. I mean, we've got to press on to a better future, recognizing our mistakes, but not burdening and using this past to describe and to essentially constrain America going forward.
Exactly correct. And, our history, as I've said before, gives us our identity, and our identity gives us our beliefs. Smart people learn from their history. People who are less than smart try to bury or change their history. Obviously, if we don't want to repeat some mistakes that were made in the past, we need to know what those mistakes are.
Well, and that's the reason we do need to study our history. Let's talk about the Biden administration and their approach to education. Not only are we seeing this promotion of the critical race theory, but we're seeing this preoccupation really with gender confusion and these, the bathroom policies that we've seen in Loudoun County, which you were there last month in Leesburg, where we've actually seen assaults in the school bathrooms as a result of this crazy policy. How come we don't follow the science when it comes to, boys and girls in bathrooms, and I would even throw in, at this administration, vaccinations? I mean, it's just like science goes out the window when it's inconvenient to your political agenda.
Of course. And sports, too. Having boys who all of a sudden feel like a girl playing girl sports, but they still have the physical attributes of a boy. How is that fair in any way? We don't think about those things, unfortunately. And, the transgender issue, how that's really child abuse. We are foisting upon little children questions like, do you feel like a girl or do you feel like a boy? You know, childhood is a time when you're supposed to be having fun. You're growing up, you're enjoying the environment, you're learning about the environment, not trying to figure out if you're a girl or boy. We already know whether you're a girl or boy. That's been biologically determined. And it's just introducing another factor of confusion into their lives. Pretty soon you're going to be asking them, well, are you really even a human being or are you a tree? I mean, come on, give me a break. We at some point, we have to start using our brains.
So are you encouraged, Dr. Carson, by what you see happening with parents across the country engaging in public education now?
I think that it's one of the most wonderful things that's happening right now. Recognize that the founders of our nation fully understood that our system, our democratic republic, would be challenged. And there would be others who wanted to fundamentally change us into something else. And when Benjamin Franklin came out of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, a woman said, "Sir, what do we have? A monarchy or a republic?" And he said, "A republic if you can keep it." It was an experiment. Could you actually have a country that was based on the will of the people? Or like every place else, where you're just going to have a dominating government that took control of your lives? And that's why our founders spent so much time formulating our Constitution. It was to give the people, we the people, the tools that they needed in order to maintain their freedom. Because governments are governments. They all do the same thing. It's not that the people in government are evil people, but it is a natural tendency for government to grow, to infiltrate, and to try to control. And our Constitution was there to keep it from taking over.
Dr. Carson, before we run out of time, I want to get your thoughts on the Biden administration's plan to get COVID shots for all the tots, ages 5 to 11. The president's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, told ABC's George Stephanopoulos over the weekend that the FDA and their advisory committee will be meeting next week on the 26th. And then their regulatory decision will be handed over to the CDC, likely November 2nd or 3rd. So it's possible, if not very likely, that shots will be available for children from ages 5 to 11 within the first week or two of November. We've not heard the M word yet, the mandate, but I'm sure it probably will come. Do you have any concerns about this?
I certainly have major concerns about that. First of all, children are not impacted by COVID anywhere near as much as elderly people who have comorbidities. They're in two completely different categories when it comes to the risk of the disease. So typically in scientific endeavors, we like to look at the benefits versus the risk. The benefits are much greater for elderly people with comorbidities than they are for young, healthy people. And in fact, the mortality rate for young, healthy people is 0.025. That's a very low mortality rate. That's similar to what it is for seasonal flu. And we don't do all these things every year for seasonal flu. So why would we be doing it in this situation, particularly given the fact that, we're frightening people. We're making little kids wear masks so that they can't see facial expressions and correlate those with what people are saying. That's a significant sociological detriment. We're not thinking about how it impacts pronunciation, speech, all these things. And I think we, at some point, need to just pull back a little bit and maybe do some things that's logical and recognize that one size does not fit all. And the reason that we have an excellent medical profession here in this country, people should work with their medical professionals to determine what their individual status is and whether they need it. To have government sitting there mandating this is just opening the door for other kinds of mandates that have nothing to do with this. And I think to some point, they just want to see how much can they tolerate? How far can you actually push people? How far can you control them? And I think they're about to find out that it's not as far as they think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Dr. Carson, we're out of time, but very quickly, another point that you made about how we're scaring children, saying that they can be carriers of the virus and that they can kill their grandparents and others. And I mean, if you think, you said old people die. It's just it's a fact of life. But we're burdening kids with many times thinking, well, maybe you're responsible for this.
Yeah, well, of course, some of them will think that if you're going around telling them that, oh, be careful, you can't be around your grandpa, you can't be around your grandma because you may kill them, even though you don't feel the result, the effects of the disease itself. What kind of damage could that do to people?
Yeah.
When we're talking about benefits and risks, we need to look at all of these things. We can't just have blinders on and look at one thing and make decisions that we try to foist on everybody on the basis of that. This is not science at all.
No, very, very insightful. Dr. Carson, always great to talk with you. We're going to encourage people to get a copy of Why America Matters. Great Christmas present for your children and grandchildren. We'll encourage people to get that when it comes out. And
go online and look at the learning program also, littlepatriotslearning.com.
All right.
You'll love it.
Dr. Carson, thanks for being with us.